things like Confucius and some of those Eastern philosophers and stuff like that. There's so much that is passed down to their and then so much of the history we have is because it's been fantastic enough. Welcome to another episode of the Joe and Doug Show. This is our spot where we try and help you become the best versions of yourself. We want to help you take whatever step is in front of you. We want you to take that next step. Last week, we dove into Joe's all-time favorite book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. We did a little bit of background, and during that conversation, Joe said that the best chapter, if you only read one chapter, the best chapter is the chapter on desire. So we are going to spend today's show talking about desire. And so how would you define desire? Let's do some definitions to start out, and then we can dive into some of the stuff.
This is hard for some people to figure it out what you want. And it's a tough one because
try going out to dinner with your spouse.
Yeah, right. But as a kid, it wasn't too hard. I mean, you can open up the JCPenney catalog and find what you wanted. It was so easy. But when you're trying to figure out what you want for yourself, it's almost like you're tethered to a reality, like an extent or a boundary with what it is. So you end up like not wanting a whole lot or what you could have. You end up wanting things that you can already see.
Well, I want to be reasonable, Joe. Like that's right. Most people like, I want to be realistic, right? That's what somebody will say to you. Does desire really fit in the camp of realistic?
No, it doesn't. I mean, nobody says I want to be a dollaire, right?
Right.
Like when you're dreaming, you want to be a millionaire, and that's not something you can go down the block and do today.
Yeah. Well, I often tell people the proof of desire is pursuit. The things that you're pursuing in your life, the way that you're going after it, you can tell me you want something, but when you start showing in those, you start living like you have what you desire, so that proof is found in the pursuit of what you're going after. When somebody tells me, oh, I want to be a doctor or whatever, but they have dropped out of college and all those sort of things, their life, you may want that, but that's more of a wish than it is a desire, because desire is going to cause you to pursue. Somebody says, oh, I'm going to be a professional athlete. There's certain things that should check, certain boxes should be checked. You used the illustration last Thursday, somebody who's single saying, I want a spouse. There's certain things that you need to do to prepare to have a spouse. And so do you find that to be pretty well true across the board in terms of desire and pursuit?
Yeah, and that's when one of the first questions during an interview that I ask is, all things like that. Don't tell me what I want to hear here.
Yeah.
What do you really want? Like if you were put in a spot where you were just loving life, what would that look like? What would the desire be? And all of those things are so like on volume number 1, right? I want people to ratchet up and like blast that sucker to 10, right?
Yeah.
And it's tough to get people to start going into that realm.
Yeah. Why do you think people shy away from that? Or I should say, why do adults shy away from that? Kids have no problem telling you desire. Graham this year for soccer, we said if he scored so many goals, we'd get him a new Switch game. He was super pumped. But recently, the last maybe week or two, he's like, I want to watch. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, instead of my Switch game for soccer, can I get a watch? And I was like, I don't see why not. I talked to my wife and sure, if that's what you really want. He's like, I want to be able to tell time. And then we started looking at watches and there was I want that one. I can take pictures with it. It plays games. It's a VTech kids watch on Amazon. It's like $50, but it looks like an Apple Watch. It's kind of like got the smart feel to it, and it's supposed to introduce them to that. And my wife's like, he cannot wear that to school or like anywhere else, or he won't get anything done. He will be on it all the time. But but it was one of those things like there was no hesitation, there was no wavering, there was no, well, maybe I want this, maybe I want that. That's what I want, and I want that one. And then for 3 days, he's going around, Benjamin, did Daddy show you my watch? That's the watch. Daddy, did you order it yet?
He gets it.
Totally gets it. And I didn't have to teach it.
Right.
That's what I want. And I'm just going to, and do you show mommy? Can we show her the video? I want to show her, this is the watch I'm going to have. And it does this, 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 and this. So why do adults struggle with that and shy away from that?
So we get kind of beat up with, as soon as we tell somebody that we want something, the realists in our lives tell us about how that's not going to happen or it's going to be unsafe and whatever. So we're really fearing criticizing, aiming a little bit too high, and then everybody's going to tell us how, it's not going to happen kind of a thing.
Right.
So
So I think for some people too, they've been burned. They've pursued something they thought was worth pursuing, and they got to the end of it and realized maybe that really wasn't what they wanted. And they're like, oh, I put so much effort into that and it didn't turn out. So now I'm not going to desire anything else. You see that a lot with people in relationships, right? They go after the one, or, they date, somebody, and they're like, oh, I thought they were it. And then the relationship breaks off and it tanks their love life, and they become gun shy, so to speak.
But they're only penalizing themselves. I mean,
100%. 100%. Well, let's get into the chapter in the book. Why don't you take us through kind of what's the kind of introduction to this, and why do you think he starts first with desire, and we can kind of go from there.
Sure. And I'm going to use the book to cue me through this because chronologically, there are some rationales how this thing is set up. Let's see, where am I at? Desire. Yeah. Okay. And it's titled, in the subtitle here, is the starting point of all achievement. Because honestly, if you cannot come up with what you want, there's nothing else in this book that works. Because that's what you're aiming at the entire rest of the
quite chapters. Literally, without desire, you don't have a target to shoot at.
Yeah, really.
You're out there with, like, I got my gun, but I got nothing to shoot at.
Right.
And that's frustrating because you may have a really cool gun. you may have really cool ammo. You may have some, stuff that's going to do some cool stuff in the world. But if you're not shooting at somebody, you're not focused enough to shoot at a particular target. We could really tether out that illustration a little bit, but so the beginning of all this is in what is it that you want? What is your desire? And like we said last week, yes, the book's called Think and Grow Rich, but don't let the title fool you. It has nothing to do with money. It has to do with goals and setting your sights on that. It happens to use some financial illustrations, but for the most part, if you want to have a stinking successful family and that's your target, great. That's what you put on the bullseye, and you focus and you aim and you pursue those things.
And when you can make something manifest, you don't stop at money. So that might be the first thing, because it's pretty much universally that nobody has enough of it. So if you set that and figure out how to do it, then you could do that with relationships. You can do that with anything.
And it's interesting, biblically speaking, Jesus talks about money more than he talks about anything else, which is really fascinating. When you think about all the things he could have talked about, he spends a lot of time channeling some of the principles in this book before Napoleon Hill was even a thought, which is
okay.
wild.
So you were normal at one time. All right, you met me, and then things got less normal in your world, and you were probably shy about these kind of things as well. But you've become super confident.
I didn't want to be shy. I feel like I didn't have the tools, or I didn't know how to process through some of that stuff. Certain things I felt like I had to be shy in, but as I've learned the tools, it's given me the confidence to not be.
Okay, you have a better understanding of like the why instead.
Yeah, like I always wanted to do like big, bold things, and I wanted to do stuff like that, but I was gun shy because I was like, all right, if I say that, what are the 3 or 4 things I have to do between here and there to actually achieve and stay focused on that? And so I was good at the first part, going, hey, we're going to do something really cool. And everybody go, okay, that sounds cool. And then about halfway through, or, the second, third week, everybody's like, I'm like, well, I don't know what to do from here. And so I think for me, this gave me step 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Okay, perfect.
And some of our conversations helped me go, I'm just asking the wrong question, or I'm saying the wrong things in this space, and I'm framing this in the wrong way. If I can reshape that, then I'll see it this way. And
you're a realist, so I think you were seeing a lot of the criticisms of the objections that nobody raised at this point, and you were pre-answering those objections, and it felt very defensive.
As a leader, I've always wanted to be a pragmatist. I'm very pragmatic, and so I've always tried to take the middle path, if you will. I want to raise the objections of my opponents, so to speak, and diffuse them as best I can, but help them understand I connect with that sentiment and continue to spur and push the vision forward, if that makes sense. And sometimes it puts me in a spot where I'm not pushing enough of the vision forward, and I'm tethering myself more to, and sometimes I definitely connect with those insecurities and fears. But as you know, when you are leading a group of people, you have both sets of people in the room, and to help bring that person along, that's probably a different podcast for a different day.
But the chapters here, the reason that's so defeating is because you put that into it. Like there might not have been anybody that even had that thought,
but then you bring it up and
lobbed it in there, trying to be helpful for those other one or two people that would have come to that conclusion, and it's all self-fulfilling from that point.
100%.
Cool. All right. Well, I want to point that out because a lot of people find themselves in that exact same boat.
Yeah.
And a lot of it under the guise of humility, won't say these bold things that we will, thinking that you're being braggadocious or whatever. And it's nothing, couldn't be anything further from the truth.
That's good.
All right. So this one here is these are the steps now for after a desire is, this is sort of like the first step. Once something pops in your head that you want, you go through these steps and I'll kind of give you my own commentary along the way. So the first thing is you got to fix in your mind the exact amount of blah, whether it be money or whatever, the exact numerically picturing it.
Details are important. Why?
And here's the thing. The more specific that you are, that means your brain processed the formula that you will believe what you just put up on the scoreboard. Okay. So if you
like,
go and
I don't want a new car. I want a red Ford 2000, whatever car, right? We want to be as detailed as possible.
Right. And so I don't want to hear that you want $1 million. I want it to be $1,563.25, right?
Right.
And it's because what you're doing is you will believe only to a certain point. When you throw a whole number out there, you didn't really believe that. You just said it because it impressed you by saying it. And you don't want to impress you. I mean, nobody's around, right? You don't have to make anybody happy about it. But if you're like, okay, well, I'm pretty confident that I could take what I did right now and I could probably do double that and then multiply that by 12. When you put in the calculator, that's where you get the $1,575,000. Very specific, because then when you dilute it back and you divide it by 12 and divide it by 7 or divide it by 30 or whatever, now you believe what you have to do per day, because you're setting yourself up for what you have to do, the verb that gets you behind that goal.
That's
all right.
Good.
So the first thing is to fix the exact amount. The second is to determine exactly what you intend to give and return. Right. This is not a free lunch. Right. Okay. And being we just put the formula together, that means
this is not this is not a hope and poke here. We're not I thought about it and now it's here. The process of this, because this there's a realm in the church that kind of like name it, claim it, blab it, grab it kind of deal. And it's not just like, oh, I want $1 million and now poof, the $1 million is going to show up. You're saying there's very tangible steps behind desire, and the proof of desire is pursuit. And so you have to put rubber has to meet the road. So what are you going to give? What are you going to sacrifice? What are you going to lay down in order to obtain that which you want?
Yes, exactly. So for the first one, avoid the round number and actually have a reason for the exact number. And it's not like put the exact number is like, I'm going to hold you to it kind of thing. Right. It's if you come up with an exact number, you got to have rationale and you got to have structure behind it. So that's what forces you into saying, all right, well, what am I considering? What are my considerations? Will I believe that I can do $1,000 for my hobby? Will I believe that I'll do $50,000? Will I believe that I'll do $500,000, and keep going until you're like, yeah, I can freaking do that.
Well, it's kind of like, we, in the process of buying our new house, I know we sat with you and Debbie a couple times and we talked through some of that, and realistically what we wanted and what was available on the market was challenging to find. But ultimately we looked at one house, we made an offer on one house, and that was the house that we bought. And then we had to believe to sell our house, which was a whole other different process. But finding that house, like, realtors do this all the time, right? They're like, well, what do you want in the house? Well, you don't just say square footage, right? Like, well, we want a first floor guest room with an ensuite bathroom. I mean, that eliminates
most of them,
right? Especially in Boardman. And we wanted to be in Boardman. Like, those were at the top of the list. And then we had some others like, oh, I'd really like a fireplace, or I'd really, certain things didn't have to, but we focused on those two. Our realtor took us to one house and literally the rest is history. But it started with us, well, what do we want? And being as specific as we could be with that. And then what are we willing to give up? Well, we're willing to give up and sell our current house. We're willing to clean this all up. We're willing to do a whole bunch of stuff to get to that spot. So keep going. Yeah.
And then the third one is to establish a definite date you intend to possess it. So this isn't a never-ending thing where like, I'll give myself a couple years.
Yeah.
It's like, we already did the math on how much.
Yep.
We already did the math on what we're willing to trade for ourselves or to provide for someone else or whatever. And now the exact date.
And sometimes life puts dates on things for you. Once we put an offer and our offer was accepted on the house that we bought, we had 30 days to sell our house. It put a definitive date on that. And we sweated, but ultimately it came through.
Yeah.
how important is the date setting to be specific, as well as the specific, like you were just saying, don't say 3 years or 5 years. Although that might be good in vague terms, you're saying this has to be much more specific, much like the beginning of.
Well, let me give you the purpose. We go about our adult lives for the most part about giving ourselves defensive outs, reasons to escape, reasons to excuse, reasons to get away from.
I don't have enough money. I don't have enough time. I don't.
And this does the opposite, where we're trying to put ourselves on the hook as much as possible. So when we box ourselves into that, that corner, right? We're doing that on purpose because we're taking out retreat from the equation. Because if we take away retreat, we can't get on the boat anymore because we burned it, right? Then we have no choice. But
that story's in there.
Did you see what I did there?
Oh yeah, I did see what you did there.
Okay, so the fourth one is to create a definite plan for carrying out your desire. So first we set the amount. Then we say what we're willing to give for it, because it's no free lunch. Then we say what date it's going to happen. And then we have to put a plan that then we set the ingredients list. We set the timeline. Now we're like, all right, all we got to assemble now. That's all we got to do is pull the parts that we just said and put it together. Now, here's the thing. When you do this, you can go back and alter things. Like, let's just say you were a little bit overzealous on the date. Just move it, right? There's nobody holding you account. Zero people.
But how many people are like, oh, I didn't make it. Well, screw it. I'll go back and do whatever I want.
Yeah.
Diets have suffered that way. I cheated one day and screw it.
Right. One of the examples was I set in my mind to do $1 million and I did $980,000. I was so disappointed. Right.
Right. I'll be disappointed all the way to the bank, Joe.
And the fifth is write out a clear, concise statement in the amount of money you intend to acquire. Name the time limit for its acquisition, state what you intend to give in return for the money, and describe clearly the plan through which you intend to accumulate. Now, that middle part, so critical, right? You have the money. Like, you ever done the whole if I win the lottery thing? And in your mind, go do the shopping and like take it as far as you can right up to the having the money? Yeah. That's what we're intending on doing right there.
Yeah, there used to be a TV show, The Lottery Changed My Life or whatever. It was on like TLC. Probably 10 or 15 years ago. And it was one of those shows that, like, on a rainy day when nothing else was on, like today, you put that on, it would be like back-to-back, like 20-minute episodes, type deal. And you'd watch these people, and my wife on numerous occasions would be like, well, obviously we'd pay off our house, or we'd buy a house, and then we'd pay off, parents' houses, siblings, everybody gets a new car, like, and, going down the list of like, wow, that's so exciting. But realistically, what you're talking about here is exactly that, but in the sense of that was just like haha fun. We didn't actually believe those things. What you're saying is this is a dead serious process. Like, I'm going to have $1 million. Here's what I'm going to give to get there, and this is what it's going to take.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. We're about to do this. So every year we do a house upgrade project. Okay. Set a budget for $10,000, and we do make an improvement that makes us happy in whatever room. Now we're going to do the bathroom next. Okay. And so we're not ready to actually do this upgrade, but what we do leading up to it is we actually do the things. Like, we have the stuff picked out. We know what it's going to look like. We know which we're going to buy. And pretty much the whole thing is done in our mind before we've spent a dime or a dollar on anything, before we have anything quoted out. Because I don't like projects to happen where I start picking things out based on a price, or picking things out based on availability, right? I want to pick it out without you telling me any of that stuff's not possible, because I don't like being tethered by limitation. That's just crazy to even say out loud, but it's true. And so let me, I want to read this to you too.
Yeah, that's your spot.
So about every 6 months, I read this, and I'm going to again give you commentary of what this says to me. Yeah. But this is a cool thing because it probably has more meanings to the reader than my version of it. Yeah. Okay, so this is a poem, and I don't even know who the author is, but it appears on chapter in the desire chapter. I bargained with life for a penny, and life would pay no more. However, I begged at evening when I counted my scanty store. For life is a just employer. He gives you what you ask, but once you have set the wages, why, you must bear the task. I worked for a menial's hire, only to learn dismayed that any wage I had asked of life, life would have willingly paid. So first, tell me what you think.
Yeah, so the first time I read that, I actually, I starred the quote above it. Okay. You see that? Read that, because that's the lead into that, and I think that's important.
Okay, remember, no more effort is required to aim high in life, to demand abundance and prosperity than is required to accept misery and poverty.
Yeah. So when I first read that quote was what jumped out. And then I felt like that poem emphasized that quote in the sense that just like we were talking about with faith and fear, like it takes no more effort for me to move my faith muscle as it does my fear muscle. They just give two different results. They're actually both the same muscle. Fear is just faith in the wrong thing. But then in this case, when you're talking about desire, I can spend just as much time, energy, and effort and get a return on investment that's miserable and everything else. And so if I show up in my life, with my spouse, my kids, my job, whatever it might be, whatever scenario you want to paint with that, and I only ask for $1, I reap what I sow. And so that's what I've put in. That's what I'm going to get out. And in the same way on this side, I can give the same effort that it took me to get $1, and I can demand more from life. So, yeah.
And so you go for an interview on a job, and the guy that's going to hire
and you're always terrified to ask for more money. And most of the time they're like,
exactly. So what if though, you could walk in there and you don't know this going in there, but whatever you ask for, right, the guy's just going to say, okay, no matter what. And so what stops you from asking what you really want, right? You bring yourself in line with what you think someone will give rather than what you want. So you answer a question that wasn't asked, right?
Yeah.
And so when you're dealing with non-traditional things, like we use that a job, but everything else in life is opposite of the employer who you're having an argument with, right?
Yeah.
The rest of life, you could just basically say whatever. And what that says is demands will then be put on you to provide the task for which you asked.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So then if again, no free lunch, if you ask for $1,000 an hour, right. And then you warm up to what you have to do to be worth $1,000. And then you have to go do that.
Yeah.
Right. You'll give the opportunity. It'll be yours, but you'll have to be able to provide the task.
Yeah. I had a mentor early on ask me this question. I had to have been maybe 19 years old. And he said, if there was anything you could do in life and you knew you wouldn't fail, what would you do? And I gave some answer that's probably different today than it was back then. I don't even remember the answer I gave, but I just remember his response. And so I gave this answer, and it was this booming big thing that I was like, man, this is what we're going to do. And he leaned across the table, leaned in. He said, you're a coward if you don't do it. And I was like, yeah, but, and then immediately my mind went to all the reasons why that wasn't actually going to happen. I gave him the lottery dream that was a wish, and not, man, I desire this so much that I will eat dirt to get there. And it really, that question, I've used it as I've mentored other people because it's so true. A lot of times we say, oh, I want that, I desire that. But realistically, when you get into that kind of sense and you're like, man, if I thought I couldn't fail, what would I do? Because there's so many times we're like, if I try that, I probably wouldn't work out, or we give all the reasons before we start. But really going in and honing down, my desire in all this is deeper than failure. I don't care if I fail. I don't care. Like I'm going for this and I'm going to succeed. That's a different kind of tenacity that you bring to the table. But so many of us are afraid, and so we don't.
Yeah, and what we talked about last time with the persistence, like most of my persistence comes from not giving two shits about what anybody else feels about a failure. You can come along and point out that something went south. I'm already at peace with it, right? 2 seconds after it's happened, I'm cool. I'm ready to go again. Yeah. But if you had people coaching you through every step of your way, that you'd feel like that's a little cruel. Yeah. Right. To insult you.
Yeah. It stung a little bit. Yeah.
It did, yeah. But that's exactly what somebody needs to hear, like you, that would inspire them for the rest of their life to pursue this.
Yeah. I mean, that's 15 years ago. And I still think about that question all the time. Like, what am I doing right now that what am I not doing right now because I'm afraid I'm going to fail because I'm a coward if I don't step out and do it? Yeah, that's definitely one of those questions that around in my head. So what are some of the inspiring stories? Obviously in desire, there's the steps. We gave some of the practical, but he tells I don't know, 25 stories. I mean, there's so many people that, they did this and they did that and they
let's cue me up with some of these. Are you referencing anyone specifically? Because I'll talk about
I mean, Barnes, we nudged on a little bit in the beginning. He's kind of how he intros him and then continues in Desire. But there's rapid fire, a dozen from Helen Keller to everybody else. And he just talks about how their Desire overcame all the obstacles that should have caused them to pack it in and fail.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's just some people who carry a personality that really know the difference between, like you said, making a wish that's kind of idle, and when challenged, you like double, buckle up.
I've heard it said this way, and this is going to sound super bumper sticker and cliche, but dreams hope to, vision plans to. And I think that's the difference here. Is he's saying, look, if you're going to have a vision, you're going to have a specific vision. You're going to have a specific date. You're going to have a specific plan. You can't just, all right, I want to be the best guitar player to ever live. All right, well, what does that look like? At what date? At what time? That's a vision. The other's a dream. And I think we've taught kids to dream, but not to vision. And this is really vision boarding, vision casting 101, if you will.
Yeah, and I think Hollywood and culture drums you up that there's a magic ring that's going to do this, right? You can sit back, drink a beer,
lottery, fountain of youth, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
And from this version of it is that so far every step of putting this together means you got to do more stuff than you did yesterday.
Right.
You got to put it together. Yep. You got to put up. Now you can pour what you believe into it and your faith in this and stuff like that. But you got to, you're the one carrying the wagon. Nobody's going to come along and say, now that you did the dream, let me take over.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So there's a couple in there. I think I highlighted some names and stuff that are in there and certain stories that jumped out. But Barnes is obviously a big one. We talked about that a little bit. He mentions his son at the end and his desire for his son to hear.
Yeah, and this one,
he spends probably 3-4 pages on that story, and it's obviously more personal to him. So he talks about his son being born with some sort of degenerative type deal, and he couldn't hear, and they said he's never going to hear. You should, all the doctor, but he resolved in himself, my son's going to hear, and then he passed that belief on, which that part I was super fascinated by. He passed that desire on to his son, and even when he tried implants and different things like that to hear, it was better for him to do it without. It was a bother to him. So, which is just a fascinating story that you not only can you have a desire, but he transferred that desire to his son.
Yeah, and culture today would be the opposite, where if you had a dad that wasn't willing to accept something like that, why not accept your kid for the hearing that he's not? And it's you take some flack over that.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah. I didn't even think of that when I read that story.
But in today's,
right.
you would just let the. Anyway, so when my son comes up to me and throws up something that he's been stewing on that he likes, my reaction is all that really matters, right? If I tell him all the reasons that he can't have it or that he needs to do more, or I want to throw a little bit of what I throw gasoline on those deals. Yeah. I don't care what it is. And that fire burns in him. If I can tell him that there's hope, I believed in him. Right. And he knows that I would never lie to him.
Right.
And so, I mean, I don't care if it's something that cost $1 billion or it's something that he already has the skill set to do. I'm right in there with him. He's on Team Danye.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so much of what we do as parents is either reinforce our child's fear or expand and grow their faith and belief in what's possible. And so many parents pass their fears down rather than their faith down, rather than their belief down. And that's one of the things I loved about that story was the fact that he was able to pass down not just any desire, but a good desire. So much so that the kid's mom Napoleon Hill's wife wanted to keep him inside, didn't want him to get a newspaper job because she was worried, the other kids and people wouldn't do that. And meanwhile, dad's going, actually, they're going to give you more money because you're going to use this disability to your advantage. People are going to feel bad for you and you're going to take them as a sucker and go get their money. And at 7 years old or 8 years old, he shimmies down out of his room, goes and gets newspaper, comes back. And I think she finds him asleep clutching the money in his hand that he had made. Success. And she was all upset about it because he could have gotten hurt and she didn't know. And he's like, dad's like, heck yeah. And so much of our success, and maybe you could speak to this a little bit. I know for me, when I have people coming along that champion the things, the desires that I have and the pursuits that I'm making, that's just wind behind my sails. I feel like I get to go faster and I can fly higher and I can try more things. And so not just in the sense of mentors, but even, as you and I've built a relationship, just to have somebody go on some of those ideas and just, not be like, well, I've tried that before. You really should consider da, 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 da. Instead, it's like, yeah,
you
let's
had
do
fire
it.
Until that moment. And
Yep.
you're like, and I don't want to ever be that way with anybody.
But how many parents, I think of, sitting down and having conversations with my mom and dad about stuff, and they were super encouraging. But they were always balanced, which is probably where I get that from. They'd be like, yeah, that's a really great idea. Go for it. Just remember this and this are possibilities. You may want to plan that it won't work out, and, you might have a backup or whatever. And, there's a book I read a while ago called "There's No Plan B," and it's all in the sense that when you make a decision, you go all in. If you hold back, you'll always go with Plan B or C or P or Z for that matter. So how do you fan the desire for yourself when you don't have anybody around? Because some people listening are like, I don't have any cheerleaders. Like, everybody around me is a negative Nancy, and I can't stand it. Nobody's cheering me on at the office, at home, wherever. So where do I find that flame to just, screw everybody, I'm going to do this anyway? Some people can play with that chip on their shoulder, but other people genuinely need the cheerleaders. So how do you find that within yourself? And then we'll talk about the other side.
So I'm an introvert, so I was a lot better at not doing this around other people to begin with. And a lot of times until you get your bearings and know how to do this, it's better to do it by yourself, because the influences of other people, until you're ready to put down a serious mastermind group, it's a lone single player match here. And because you don't really, nothing in here requires the consent of other people. It's you versus you up until like the last chapter in here. And so if you're, if you're by yourself and you're sick of people telling you can't do something, you're going to sit down with your thoughts, a piece of paper, and you're going to do those 5 things. You're going to sit there and you can think about something that you want bad enough to get you out of bed, to work hard, to work late, to put all of your energy in. And then once you get a success, once you get one that you knocked it out, right? Then it's time to bring someone and said, here's what I did, and here's how I did it. And now you have a fan that's not going to tell you how it's not going to go well. Sure. It's going to be like, how the hell did you do that?
Yeah. Now, on the cheerleading end, we all need those people. And I think I know Joe's answer to this, and then I'll give my answer. Do you go seeking those people out? Do you try and find like-minded, like-spirited people that you just, man, I get energy when I'm around you, and I feel better about my projects or things I got going on, or sometimes it's fun to get 2 entrepreneurs in the same room, because all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's a killer idea. I was stuck on this. And so do you seek out those relationships, that kind of matching fires, if you will? And then, so answer that, and then I'll.
All right. So once you get into the later chapters, a lot of this energy is reciprocal. Okay. So you have to figure out creative ways to give stuff away, right? So that you'll be replenished through it. And so you don't want to waste the opportunity of having a success for me and you just to like share a success, but it doesn't get us any further ahead. Yeah. I'll reserve that energy to give it to someone who can really be inspired by that success and help them in their pursuit by using that as the example that gets them somewhere. So it doesn't become like a social cause where we get to talk about our, smoke cigars and tell each other how great we are, right? Yeah. You're going to use that energy to push somebody a little bit in whatever they're pursuing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think for me, being an extrovert, I sometimes I need the flap of somebody else's wings to help remind me, oh yeah, I can do this, I can keep going. Because usually, and this is kind of the way the progression goes, and you and I've talked about this, you have the great idea, you set the date, you make the plan, you lay out this vision, and then at some point, right when you start, there's a something comes in, the first thing you try and do tanks, or somebody on your team shows up and they're like, can't be done. We don't have enough money. We can't do this. We can't do that.
And there's a really, really specific reason.
You and I've talked about
this.
Give it.
And there are a million different iterations, and it depends on you more than anything else. So it'll manifest as another person telling you can't do it. It'll manifest something in the natural world that looks like an obstacle. Sometimes it'll be you, and you'll fall victim to a vice, and the vice will keep something out of range. But whatever you choose. So if you choose to create people around you that tell you can't do something, and you're good at dealing with that, then that's the one that you should go, because it's always going to be there. It's always going to be an obstacle, because this is going to challenge you to see how serious you are about throwing that desire. So the first step is something you'll believe, right? And then the second step is what you'll climb over to be able to get what you believe.
Yeah, what mountain are you willing to climb over?
Yes.
No, and that's so true. And I think with any number of events in people's lives, whether we talk about money very specifically, a spouse, kids, etc., the moment you're like, this is what we're going to do, here comes the hurdle, and the hurdle is there to find out, do you want it enough? And then once you clear the hurdle, I have found anyway, once I have climbed that mountain, I get to descend, and it's easier to go downhill than it is uphill. Right. So the initial part is like, man, do I want this bad enough to climb over this mountain? But once you get to the top and you're like, this view is pretty awesome, then you have the downhill, which is much easier than the
do you know
uphill.
you do end up getting addicted to the hurdles at a certain point? I mean, it is such an adrenaline rush to see, like, all right, who's my giant going to be this time? And it appears, you're like, yeah, I'm going to nail you.
Yes. No, 100%. And I think the further along people go in this, and the more mature, just like with any skill, you can start with little things, but as you build up to big things and you realize that the giants and the mountains are really just illusions you've created. And even the ones that are very tangible, very physical, they come in the forms of people or financial obstacles or health obstacles or whatever they are. There's a piece of paper that says, or somebody says, they really are what you make them. And so at some level you can kind of begin to hack the system. Oh yeah, and
that's a good word to use, because I believe 100%.
You've used that before.
Yeah. Let me tell you a story about a Henry Ford story about desire. So, and I'm going to paraphrase this whole thing, and I'll garbage it up, but you'll get the point.
Yeah.
And so he was determined to create a V8 engine out of a single block, which couldn't be done at the time. Right. Yeah. And so he told his research and development guys, go ahead and do this. And he set, I think it was like 5 or 6 guys, their whole job was just to figure out how to forge one block, out of one piece of metal. And I think it was, he let a year go by, and he met up with his guys, and he was like, so how's it coming along? And they were like, it can't be done. Right. And he was like, do it anyway. And he walked away for another year, and then came back and said, okay, guys, how's it coming along? It just can't be done. And he was like, do it anyway. And how many cycles of being told that something couldn't be done after putting huge expense, 8 guys working around the clock, or, a normal deal to invent something that they're telling you is not possible. And you don't it
wasn't like they were guys that didn't know either. Like,
right. These guys are telling you for sure.
Yeah.
And it must have taken probably 4 or 5 years of this constant cycle of being told couldn't be done before they did it. And then the V8 engine out of a single block was born. And then so what's most important about this story is, most of us, when we hit the obstacle of being told no, how quickly we are to agree with the person who said no, especially if it's someone who knows better than me. Because Henry Ford was not a mechanical genius. He was reliant on people who knew more than he did. And usually he took a lot of their advice to create great products. But in this case, he was determined. Yeah. And he saw something that they didn't, and it wasn't for a mathematic or a scientific reason. Right. He just knew that it could be possible, and he was willing to sacrifice treasure and sacrifice his notoriety, because these people probably think he was freaking crazy for 4 years worth of research and development.
Well, especially, everybody's supposed, you listen to the experts. The experts know they're safe, they're secure, they've worked hard at this. Don't beat yourself up. Like you can hear I'm sure he had some interesting conversations with his wife as he wrote another check for them to build the V8 engine. But thank God, how many trucks and stuff like that today. The V8 engine has served humanity so well. I mean, you think of remote places in the jungle that you don't have to go by donkey anymore. You can take a car with 4-wheel drive and a V8 engine, or a truck or an SUV or whatever, and and that was because of one person's desire and tenacity. And
well, I'll tell you, like the whole thing idea, like when I picture an idea, it's always something that hasn't been done yet. So if you ask any expert about how you're going to do something that's not been done, they're all going to tell you. So, the idea is going to live in your head until you do it. And that's not a cliche thing. Yeah. Everything that's in your head is going to be impossible until you decide to do it.
Yeah. Can I take a cheap political shot?
Go ahead.
So you mean like coronavirus? All the experts that have never dealt with a pandemic, they've gone to school, they've read books and all that stuff.
And it's interesting that you say that, because you can literally go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
You can literally take any cultural problem and put it through this machine of creation, and you will see that it always leads to a different thing than you see play out in the political sphere.
Yeah, because nobody knows what they're doing with it. We did a whole show on the coronavirus, and in the beginning, the CDC said this, and the WHO said that, and then the experts said this, and Dr. Fauci said that, and it has been a big mess of, we really don't know what we're doing, but we're supposed to listen to the experts and to science. But the experts in science really don't know what they're doing because we've never experienced this before. And part of that allows me to be much more gracious with those in office, with those trying to figure this thing out. Like at the end of the day, yeah, I get it. We've never dealt with this before. We're all trying to figure this out. The school systems are trying to figure it out. Do we go with a hybrid system? Do we go with all in? Like at the end of the day, when we have experts in our life, and COVID's the most obvious example of that right now. It's very tangible for everybody because we've been told the experts know better. And I love stories like Ford, and I think of Steve Jobs and others where people were like, well, that's impossible. You can't make a microchip that small. You can't do this. And they just barrel through anyway. And like, yeah, I'm going to show you we can. Does desire have to be reckless?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. And in fact, some of the early ideas, if we had a conversation and you compared your ideas with mine, like I would think you're the most docile person on the planet, because the things that when you trust this thing, what you're willing to do that you don't really feel is risky. But I bet you everything you see that I do is reckless to some extent. And I don't lose any sleep at all about any of it. So, I mean, you could do something as easy as, I have the idea that I don't want to have regret going into weekend into a Monday. I want to, I want to have Mondays be great days, right? Yeah. And that's an idea that if you look around, common people hate Mondays. Yeah. Oh, go to work, right?
I hate that. So frustrating. I'm like, then quit your job. Stay home. Put your sweatpants on. Like,
but if you said that idea and you start assembling how you would actually pull that off, you're saying, well, that would be pretty simple. I defied logic. I defied what 99% of the people say and do. My Mondays are freaking great now. Yep. I think I could do more of that. And I wouldn't say that's a pretty reckless thing. You could start with a completely easy one.
Yeah. I just think, when you think about desire and going against the experts, some people would say, well, that's a little reckless. I mean, Ford pouring all that money in, time, energy, effort, paying employees, all the like some people, business people on the outside be like, oh, you could have invested in like there were safer plays for him.
And the world would have stayed the same.
Exactly. 100%. But I think that's my point is, maybe reckless is the wrong word, but desire is one of those things that if you follow it through to the end of itself and you really believe, it shifts and changes the world. It appears to be reckless because it's not safe and it's not.
Exactly.
But in that sense, it maybe appears to be reckless is probably the better term than. But desire will drive us to do that.
But if you got a magic formula that could do stuff, and then you trust that formula, why wouldn't you take it the extent that actually changes the world for the better or shapes lives or whatever? You would, as soon as it's an exercise muscle that you can control.
Yeah. Well, as we're closing here, for those people listening going, those 4 steps are cool. This sounds neat. Obviously, you would encourage them to pick up a copy of the book. But what's one thing they could do to flex that desire muscle? What's an exercise they could do to help themselves step in and start, really believing and dreaming and putting some pen to paper type deal?
Well, we spend more time on this chapter, and it's great that it's the opening one, because if I lose you at any point, I'd rather it be in the first chapter, right? And so it is extremely hard for regular people to dream big enough or desire big enough, or not like just take an awful move and just throw something out there that's fanciful just for the sake of doing it. Yeah. So that's first thing, like picking something you really want to do, not what you think somebody wants to hear, not something that you think is achievable, right? Really starting to believe in yourself. And then the second part of this is you have to silence first your own critic that's in your brain.
Yeah.
And then the people that are around you. Figure out a way to get people in your world that you trust, so that you can say something to, and you know, it's like, well, you shouldn't do that. So that'll occupy the first 90% of this process, is setting yourself up and then setting up your environment so they're productive for this.
That is good stuff. Well, that's a preview. You should get the book, and if you only read one chapter in the book, we said it last Thursday, you should read the chapter on desire. At the end of the day, man, when you put your heart and mind and energy and effort into something, you can create and make it happen. It's really powerful when it does. We will see you back here Thursday for another episode of the Joe and Doug Show. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. If you like our programming, we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our Facebook page, or subscribe to your favorite podcast platform like iTunes or Spotify. This is original Youngstown content, and we would appreciate you sharing the videos and the word about us. Thank you.